Hello and welcome to another adventure. So today I wanted to have a quick talk about stoves, because if you're going to go on a trip, you're going to go camping, you're going to go away on an adventure, you're probably going to need to cook, unless you're stopping in a hotel, but then why would you want to do that? So at some point you're probably likely to need a stove, and there's a lot of choice out there, so I just thought I would give you my two penn'orth worth. As ever, I'm not going to preach that you must get this stove and that stove's better than the other. What I want to do is just sort of get your juices flowing and then get you searching on the internet. Look, because I do this nearly every day, and I know a lot about stoves. So if you're a beginner and you're thinking, what do I need? What shall I get? Then this might help you. This might be a good guide as to what to look for and what are the pros and cons of each type of stove. So let's get stuck in. Let's have a look at stoves. We're going to start off first with gas stoves. This might take a while to get through all of this, but I'll keep it as quick as I can, but it might be a good time to get a brew and a biscuit. Okay, so I don't think anyone is going to argue with me when I say probably the easiest stove to use is a gas stove. They're quite ubiquitous, they're quite easy to get hold of. I can go down to my little pound shop in my nearest town and get some gas canisters. I can get a cheap little stove. You can get them easily on Amazon. They're just so easy to use, gas stoves. But they don't really float my boat. They're not something that I get excited by, gas stoves. And that's probably why I've only got two of them. So I certainly recommend this stove that I'm going to show you, but by all means, do some research and find out what works for you. So this is what's called a Soto Windmaster. It's a brilliant, brilliant stove. You will not find a bad review of this online, I don't think. It's really, really highly regarded. Soto is a Japanese company. They make great stoves. I've got another stove I'll come on to in a minute. So this is called the Windmaster for obvious reasons, is that it's good in the wind. And it's dead easy to set up. So it comes in that little bag. You just take these legs off of there like that. And then this just slots onto the top there. He says it's easy, making it look really difficult. Oh, if I did it the right way around, it would help, wouldn't it? Yeah, so there you go. Stove's up and running. And then all I've got to do is put it onto a gas bottle. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to put it on this big gas bottle. These are the sort of gas bottles I take when I'm racing and I'm setting up my base, putting up my gazebo and that, ready for a race. And so I'm not worried about how much gas I've got and is it going to last. So I take a big canister like this. So the other good thing about this Soto Windmaster is it's regulated, so no matter how much gas there is in the cylinder, the regulator keeps the flame constant. It doesn't burn brightly then. As the gas gets lower, the flame gets lower. So it's got a built-in regulator, and it's also got a built-in piezo lighter, never know how to say that word. So effectively what that means is I can turn on the gas. This is where technology fails me. There you go. So click of the button and it's up and running. So there's no denying they're simple, they're easy, gas stoves. You can simmer really easily. This one especially as well. Look, I've got this little pot, so my little pot will easily go on there. Or I've just recently bought this big pot. Just bought this big pot, and that will easily go on there as well. So on something like that, on the Soto Windmaster, very flexible, very, very easy to use, very efficient. What you can also get to go with your gas stoves is something like this. So this cost a couple of quid, not a lot, from Go Outdoors. It's just a base. So let me just turn that off and just put that there for now. So it's just a base. So here inside this old trainer sock, I've got one of the small style gas canisters. So the sock serves two purposes, because I can put that little canister in there, and then when I'm going on a trip and I drop that into there, it stops the canister rattling around in the pot, so you sound like something from Carry On Camping as you're riding down the trail. You don't want that, it's not cool. Yeah, so the sock just makes it, stops the rattle, easy to pull out of there. And one of the downsides to gases is that they don't work very well in cold temperatures. So 0 and below, I mean certainly getting down to 0, the gas inside, it starts to freeze. And without getting too technical and making this video even longer, so it is just one of the downsides to gas. There are ways and means around it, hence I put this little sock on it. And then that just fits onto there like that. And then you've got this solid base to use and cook from. I'm not a fan of the jet boil type stoves, because before you know it, you end up with this really high thing that just is so easy to fall over. They're just bulky. I'm not a fan. I never have been a fan. So the other stove I've got is this little thing here. It's called a BRS 3000 titanium. I mean, it is the tiniest little stove, but it's brilliant. If you just want something for a lightweight, simple, easy trip that you're doing, you won't go far wrong with something like this. So this just, again, just screws onto there like that. Make sure it's all the way on. So that screws onto there like that. Easy peasy. Turn on the gas, and then you're going to need a lighter of some sort. Yeah, easy as that. It's already at maximum temperature. It's good to go. No priming, no fuss. But this is one of the problems with gas for me, is the noise. Yeah, and it's not a major issue. Most of the time it's not a problem at all. But I'm quite an early riser, so when I did my Trans-Anglia trail trip last year, I was getting up at 5 every day because, well, it's light, I'm in a tent. So as soon as I wake, I want to brew. And if you've got someone sleeping next to you and you're rattling your pans and you've got your, pardon me, you've got your gas stove blasting away, it can annoy people. But obviously it's not always a problem. So gas, very efficient, very easy to use, quite easy to get hold of the gas canisters, but can be a bit of a problem. Gas, though, itself is about 5 times more expensive than the other two methods that I'm going to show you, either alcohol or fuel. So gas is a bit expensive. And the other issue that you get with gas is, what do you do? So you've gone on a trip and you've only used 2/3 of a gas bottle. So you can weigh gas bottles. I know that this gas bottle on its own weighs 200 grams and it's got 100 grams of gas in it. And I know I use 10 grams of gas approximately to boil 300 ml of water, which is enough for a brew or doing one of the freeze-dried meals. So I could weigh this when I come back from a trip, and then I know how much gas is in it. So say I've got 60 grams left, I know that that's enough then for 6 boils. 60 grams, I use about 10 grams per boil. That's enough for 6 boils. But what if I need 10 boils? Or what if I think I need 8 boils? What are you going to do? So gas, this is where it can be a pain, because you then, right, I'll get another canister out and I'll use that. And then before you know it, you've got several canisters that you've either got to dispose of, or you've got to do something with them. You know, take 2 half-full canisters with you on a trip. But there is a way around that. You can get something like this. So this is a gas adapter, gas fill adapter. I'll put links up to all of this stuff that I'm showing you, if I can find a link for it. So I got this on Amazon. The little arrow is just to show the direction of the gas flow. So what you can do is you can get a gas cylinder, a gas canister that is the donor canister, which is another reason I get the big ones. So you screw this onto one canister, you then screw the other one on top, and you basically transfer the gas from one to the other. If you look it up on YouTube, refilling camping gas canisters, you'll find some tutorials. It is a bit of a pain. You have to put one of them in the freezer. I can't remember which one it is now. Yeah, so that is one of the big downsides to gas. It can just be a bit of a pain in the backside, but there's no denying it's efficient, it's quick, it's very easy to use, very easy to simmer. You can get various sizes of gas stove, from great big things to tiny, tiny little ones like this BRS 3000, which this is so small, I carry this as like an emergency stove, because look, it's not going to take up any room, so I can put that back in its little bag, and then look, you can squirrel that away in your luggage somewhere, no problems at all. So, you know, I think they're worth getting, something like that, just for that very reason, as a sort of backup emergency stove. I'll come more onto that in a minute. Yeah, so that's gas stoves. Right, so let's have a look at alcohol stoves. Alcohol stoves are probably, all of these are the simplest to use. They're very, very easy to use, because all essentially an alcohol burner is a pot. So this is one of the most recent ones I bought. This is called a Bailey burner, and it's just a simple little pot that you can buy these off of Amazon. And if you look on YouTube and search for homemade alcohol burner, you'll find lots of YouTubers have done tutorials on making things like this. I think this cost me 11 quid though off of eBay. I'll put a link if I can find it. And I just, you know, I just have the time to get all the bits. So this is one of the most simplest ones that you might find. And when they're like this, they're just known as a burner as opposed to a stove, because there's nowhere to put the pan. So this is an alcohol burner, gas lighter, and you just light that there. You probably won't see that at the minute, but there is a flame there that has lit. So while that's just warming up and getting to its sort of maximum working point. So alcohol stoves use any form of alcohol really. So most people go for something like this. So this is called bioethanol. You buy this from Amazon, but you can get it in Go Outdoors. You can get it in B&Q, places like that. So it's relatively easy to get hold of. But it's not something that you're going to find, say, in a petrol station or in a village shop normally. But what you can use in alcohol stoves is meths. So sometimes they're called a meths burner or a spirit burner. But most people tend to use bioethanol because it's more efficient, it burns hotter, and it doesn't blacken up your pots. So one of the problems with meths is, once you've finished cooking, the bottom of your pot will be absolutely filthy, and then, you know, it just gets all... I mean, it's not a major drama, but it is very, very cheap. It's way, about a fifth of the price, if not more, cheaper than gas. So you can see, this is what's called, like I said, this Bailey burner, and then what you would need to go with this is something like this. So this is a really light little titanium pot... a little light titanium pot stand. So that just goes in there like that, and that just simply drops over the top of that there. Normally you would obviously put the stand on before you lit the stove. So you can see that's burning now, and then now I would just put my little pot on there. This particular stand came with another section, so you can use bigger pots. And you can see, you've now just got this simple flame that you use to cook. But that's it. You can't really adjust this one. You can't make it the flame bigger or smaller. What you see is what you get. But it is very, very cheap, very effective, easily packs away. And the good thing with the Bailey burner is this. I can quickly blow it out like that. Let's take that off of there. That might still be a little bit warm. Yeah, and the other good thing with a Bailey burner is there's nothing to spill out of it. Inside here, it's got this sort of mesh gauze top to it, and then inside there is some sort of carbon wadding, like a carbon felt, and that's packed into there, and the alcohol soaks into that. So then if you do knock this over in your tent, you're then not going to knock alcohol all over everywhere and just make an absolute mess and, you know, set your tent on fire, which, you know, generally I think most people would say that's not a good thing. Yeah, so that's something simple like that. That's the Bailey burner. But what a lot of people use, and these have a cult status really, is something like this. So this is a copy of what's called a Trangia burner. This is made by a company called Esbit, which is exactly the same thing. Lots of companies doing knockoffs of the Trangia burner. And this is probably a little bit more complex, but essentially it's just a pot with the alcohol in, comes with a lid. So the bonus of these two stoves is you can put alcohol in them, take the lid off, light it, and off you go. So let me just quickly show you. So same with this one. This is the Esbit burner. So it's already got the alcohol in. It comes with a lid. Obviously the washer there just to keep the fuel in. And then you also get this thing that's called a snuffer or a simmering. So I can just drop that on there and that puts out the flame. Also you can use this to adjust the size of the flame. And if you'd have said to me last year, Mike, would you use an alcohol stove? I would have said, not a chance. But then I started watching this guy called Ernie, the Paleo Hiker MD on YouTube. And he just does all these reviews of stoves. And he does a really, really good job of it, doing the boil times. I mean, if you get into alcohol stoves, you are going down a massive rabbit hole into a world of cultness and people in their sheds knocking up these things and making their own little cat can stove. Don't ask, go and look. And I just really like them. I just like so much about them. So to go with this recently, I bought this thing. This is called a Trangia triangle. It collapses down and flattens and it fits into this little flat bag here. And then that easily fits into my big pot there. So this is the Trangia triangle. And then your Trangia stove just drops into there. And then, yeah, so I'm just lighting that. Now, one of the big drawbacks to the alcohol stoves is they take a while to do something that's called bloom. So blooming, I only know this because of Ernie. Blooming is when the stove is running at sort of max chat. You know, it's like when you're warming up your two-stroke bike. It's not great from push of the button. Certainly the older bikes anyway. You've got to wait for it to sort of warm up a bit. Yeah, and these are the same. So this stove here, just let me get my other camera. So this stove at the minute, it is still warming up. And there's these little jets, these little holes around the edge of the stove, these ports. And the alcohol inside the cylinder, it gasifies and comes up through these ports. You can see it's just starting now, just starting to bloom. And until eventually it's sort of working at maximum efficiency. And so you're probably kind of thinking, well, Mike, why would you want to bother faffing with all of that when you can just get your gas stove out, bish, bash, boom, you know, you're boiling your brew. Well, as you can hear, the real advantage to these stoves, well, there's two really, is they're silent. So they make no noise. So when you're an early boy like me who's up at 5 and I'm making a brew, because, you know, I just, that's how my body clock works. I can fire this up, make a coffee, and I'm not going to piss, you know, my buddies off who are still fast asleep, sleeping off their hangovers, which is probably where I wish I was, but that's just the way my body works. So like when I did the Trans-Anglia trail trip last year, I was getting up really early and I was in a campsite quite close to people on one occasion, and I just made my brew at like 5:30 and I was listening to the birds. Or say I take an alcohol stove with me sometimes when I go and walk the dog. And, you know, we'll get in a wood and we'll find a place to sit and I'll make a brew. And you can just, you know, be silent and stealthy. Another good reason for using these if you're doing some wild camping where you shouldn't be. So you can be silent and stealthy and just listen to your surroundings and enjoy it. So with this, you get this little simmering, and then using the simmering, you can adjust the size of the flame, or like say you've can use it as the snuffer to put it out, as simple as that. So with a triangular triangle, it means you can use bigger pots like that. That easily fits on there. It's a great bit of kit. But then you've got other stoves like this. So this is my ERA burner from a company called Goshawk. It's an absolute beast of a stove. And like a lot of alcohol stoves, once you light it, they are very, very difficult to put out if they've not got a snuffer or a lid like these two. So you kind of have to be good at judging how much alcohol to put in them. I'm not really selling alcohol stoves here am I? Because it does sound like a bit of a faff. So, but they are cheap to run. They are very, very simple to run. They are silent, so you can enjoy your surroundings. If you take gas, then you've got that problem of a half full canister, but you need more than half a canister. What are you going to do? Well, you could buy one of the adapters and fill up a canister from a bigger canister, but with alcohol it's not a problem, because you just take a little pot, and it can be anything. This is an old, I forget, I got this off my wife. I think she kept nail varnish remover in it, and so I now know that each one of these is about 15 ml of alcohol, and that's enough for me to make a brew using either my ERA burner or this other little one I've got here. So you can put the alcohol in any bottle. This is a proper bottle made by Trangia, makes it very, very easy to pour it into another bottle. Like I say, you obviously get the big bottles that it comes in. So that does keep the alcohol system really, really simple. The other good thing with alcohol is it's relatively effective in cold weather as well. So if you are somewhere and it's really cold, you know that alcohol is going to burn. It is sometimes more tricky to light when it's colder. That's why I recommend that you use a sort of turbo flame like this, because it will light the alcohol a bit quicker than using a match. But then, you know, like I say, one of the other downsides to say something like this is you can't simmer with this. It's kind of all or nothing. There's no turning it down. And this thing is a beast when it's going. That will boil a pot of water in about 4 minutes. So say about 300 ml, which is enough for a freeze-dried meal or making a brew. Something like the Trangia or the Bailey burners, about 6 or 7 minutes. Whereas a good gas stove, you know, something like the BRS burner, as tiny as it is, 2 minutes, you've boiled your water, job done. If you go on YouTube and do some research, you'll see these have got a cult status and a great following, and I really, really like to use them. Just one word of warning, you've just got to be super careful, because if you've got something like the Trangia, which has got the alcohol in there, and that is lit in your tent, and then you knock that over, it's just going to knock alcohol everywhere and set your tent on fire. So you've got to be really, really careful with the Trangia stove. Obviously, once it's finished and it's cooled down, you can put the lid on, and then the alcohol is safe in there, no problem. But you just need to be wary of that. I really like alcohol stoves. I've enjoyed using them. I use one a lot, more so than all the others, because it's just so cheap. Gas can be quite expensive. And I like to just sit quietly in a wood when I'm out with a dog and make a brew sometimes. Yeah, so alcohol stoves, good points and bad points to them, as with all the others. So now we're going to talk about petrol stoves. And I do think for me, with a petrol stove, it is the stove that just makes the most sense for us as adventure bike riders and people who are on a motorbike, because without petrol, no trip. You know, we can't go and do our things if we haven't got access to petrol. So gas, you might find it difficult to find, or certainly a pain. You know, you go into a town and you're always, where might I get a gas canister? Same with something like bioethanol or meths in the alcohol stoves. Whereas petrol, it's generally easy to find petrol, or very easy to find petrol. And like I say, no petrol, no trip. So I like petrol for that reason. It makes a lot of sense for us as adventure bike riders. I've got 2 petrol stoves. I've had 2 or 3 over the years. In my army days, everyone was buying these Coleman fuel stoves that had the multi-type burners and generators, so it would run off anything. It would run off aircraft fuel, it would run off diesel, it would run off kerosene, it would run off petrol, and they were really popular. But as I've said, when you think about it, we only need petrol. If we haven't got petrol, no trip. So I've got 2 stoves. This is the one I've bought fairly recently, and this is actually this design of this stove. This is called a Svea, S-V-E-A, that's spelt Svea 123R, or a Svea 123. So this is new. I bought it on Facebook Marketplace, but it was nearly new, and you can buy these on Amazon today, and they look exactly the same. It's the same design that's been made for decades and decades. I think this goes back to the 40s, the original design. And so how does it work? Well, in here, let me just take this little key out there. So if I take that off top there, that's the windshield and sort of pot stand. And then inside you've got the stove here. This very, very lovely brass stove. And the way it works, so you put petrol inside the cylinder into the stove itself. Obviously take the lid off here, put your petrol in, fill it up to a certain point, not to the top, because these stoves need a space to create pressure. So you don't quite fill it all the way up to the top. And then in this rim round here, we can see this sort of greening. That's because I've put alcohol gel in there. So just the kind of, bear with. So just this sort of stuff, which is the hand sanitizer alcohol gel. So I carry a bottle like that with me. And to prime this stove, which makes this stove so easy and so simple to use, you put alcohol gel into there. The stove will eventually, the heat from the gel will create pressure in the cylinder, and then you open the tap, light it, and hey presto, you've got this this Svea stove made in Sweden. I mean, just look at it. It is, even though it's quite old, I think that it is very tactile. It's a very gorgeous thing. If you were going to take a stove into some sort of post-apocalyptic Armageddon, this is the one you take, because there's nothing to break on it. It will always work. And the design's been around for years and it hasn't changed. There's good reason for that. So it is a very efficient, good stove. It's not great at simmering, but one of the problems with it is, so you'll use the stove, you'll switch the stove off, you'll start eating your dinner, and you've got a brew, and then you'll drink your brew, and then you'll think, oh, I want to make another brew. So you go back to the stove, and you've got to go through that priming process all again. So you've got to reheat it up, you've got to put the gel in, warm it up again, wait for it to heat up and build up the pressure, open the valve, yeah, it's running, start. And so it can just be a little bit of a pain to use. But that said, it is a brilliant, brilliant stove. Very stable. You've got this pot stand that goes on the top like this. Like that, and then screws down. And then obviously you've got these adjustable feet on the top there, so you can adjust it for any size. You can move them out for a bigger pot. So a great stove, utterly bomb-proof, but it's a bit heavy. It's just a bit clumsy to use at times. Awesome bit of kit. Does come with its own little pot like that, but through trial and error, I've realised that it will actually fit into my little Soto pot here that I've got. So that's one of the pots I use. That does slot into there to make it quite a nice little compact system. But what I tend to take, and if I was going on a long trip tomorrow to, across Morocco, whatever, and I needed to take a stove, then probably what I would take with me would be this stove. So this is called the Soto Muka stove. I'll put up a link. And unfortunately, they're difficult to get in the UK now. I don't know why Soto have stopped selling them. They did bring out another stove called the Soto Stormbreaker, I think it's called, which is a multi sort of fuel stove. But you can still get these. You've just got to order them from Japan, which isn't a problem because I order stuff from my Honda from Japan and it just takes a bit longer to come in the post. We all get a bit, you know, we want it next day because of Amazon Prime, but you can get them. You can get these stoves. And so it's a petrol stove. And the reason this is better than lots of other petrol stoves, so I used to have, say, like a Whisperlite stove, MSR Whisperlite, but there's a lot of faff with them, and you basically have to set the thing on fire to get it to work. If you've not seen a petrol stove before, a lot of them are quite tricky to work. But the thing with the Soto stove is it works off much higher pressure. So when you light it, it lights and primes way, way quicker. So this is just a little bottle cooler. And I bought that off as Amazon just as a protector. So with things like the Whisperlite stove and this MSR Muka, you need some sort of fuel bottle. So with Soto, it has to be a Soto fuel bottle because they've got a much wider neck. So this is the 1 litre bottle, and you can see the neck there is much, much wider. But that's a good thing because if you're at a petrol station filling it up, you can put the nozzle straight in there and fill it up. Whereas, say, with the MSR bottles, you can't. So you get different size fuel bottles. There is one in between that as well. And so this is what's called the pump, and it's got the button controlling it on the top here. So I'm just going to make sure I've got it set to the right thing. So I'm going to put this to stop, so it's there. And basically what you've got to do is you've got to pump it up quite a few times. So again, this is why gas is better, because you haven't got to do any of this with gas. Obviously with alcohol you haven't got to prime it, but you've got to wait for it to sort of reach peak operating temperature. And there's a little bit there that pops out once you've reached the right pressure, which is one of the bonuses to this stove, say over the Whisperlite. So the little red marker's now popped out, because with a Whisperlite you never quite know how many pumps to give it. Well, this tells you how many pumps, and you could see that wasn't a lot of pumps. So I've pumped it up, and then you've got this nice flexible hose here. And you can see this just sits on this stand. So with some of them you have to turn them and spin them, and they get very complicated. This is so simple. God knows why Soto have stopped selling it, because it's a great stove. So it's just got a collar here for this quick release coupler. So I'm just going to disconnect that, put that into there. Okay, right, that's connected. This plunger goes up or down. So if at any point you want to kill it off, you just push the button down and it stops it. So I'm going to go to start and then get my lighter ready and then lift it up. So normally when you do this with something like the Whisperlite, this is the point where you're worried you're going to set your tent on fire, but not with this. So you leave it about 10-15 seconds just to warm up until it calms down. So you can see, there we are, we're calm. And then you turn it to run. And it'll just take another couple of seconds. But because of that higher pressure that you create with this, this system, it means you don't have that whole priming malarkey. Go on YouTube and look at MSR Whisperlite. And they are a very, very popular stove, but for me, they're just an accident waiting to happen. Whereas this, how easy is that? So they're not as good as simmering, the petrol stoves, as the gas are, but you can turn this down. It's a bit fiddly, it's not as easy, but I've fried eggs on this. If you look at one of my shorts recently, think it was this, maybe it might have been the other stove actually, but I have cooked bacon on this, no problem. Steaks, using a frying pan, not a problem at all. So if at any point I want to stop it, I just push it down and it will die down. There's obviously fuel in the system, but by pushing it down like that, it stops the stove. So I've just turned it back to start there. So I could eat my tea now, I could have a brew. And then once I'm ready, you know, a few 5-10 minutes later, I want another brew. It's just a case of lift it back up on start. Turn it to run. And there you go, you've got your flame back. It's a very, very simple stove to use. You occasionally have to give them a bit of a pump as it's going. But that's just the downside to them. So again, I'm just going to turn it off. Turned it to stop. And just let that cool down a second. So obviously, it's not going to be as good, you know, on with a little pot like that. But you can see it will easily work. No problem at all. And then obviously you've got a very good stable platform with a big stove like that for using a bigger pot. With the Soto, you get things in the kit. So this is the bag, and then say in the kit you also get this bit here, which is just like a foil bit for it to sit on. So these are the sorts of things that you need to think about if you're new to camping and you're wondering which stove to get. Is what's it all going to sit on? So with a Soto, you get something like that, and you also get a windshield. So this is a windshield, so you just basically put that round your pot. It sort of holds itself together. If you Google the Soto, on YouTube, look for the Soto Muka, you'll find reviews for it. So that all comes part of the kit, which I think it's about 140-ish quid from Japan. You get a few spare O-rings and another couple of bits with it. So it is a very simple, very easy to use, doesn't take a lot of effort. It's to disconnect it, all I've got to do now is I turn this to air here. And so you can hear the air rushing out now. So the air's just going to rush out, and because it would just sort of clean the system out. And then you've not got this pressurized thing in your kit that's going to explode at any point as you're riding along. And then once that's done, I can just disconnect that, put the cap on, and that's good to store. Yeah, so then I'll keep that in there just so it's something to protect it, stop it getting bashed. And if there is a leakage, it's, you know, I mean, it's highly unlikely, but then at least it's in something that's going to catch it. Now, the other good thing I think about using a petrol stove is, at a push, if you need a litre of fuel and you've got that on your bike in your kit somewhere, then you've at least got a litre of fuel. And you might need 3 litres to get to where you need the next petrol station. But I'd sooner be pushing my bike a little bit less. Or it might be enough to get you out of a pickle. So I think that is the real Brucey bonus with petrol. Because you're going to be filling up, you know, every day, every other day. So when you go to the fuel station, it's easy to top this up. It's easy to just keep it on the bike, and then in an emergency you've got petrol. Or if you need petrol and you haven't got any here, then you can siphon off some petrol for the bike to get your stove to work. Obviously depending on the scenario. So yeah, so that is actually, of all of these, if there's only one stove I can have from here on in, it would be this stove, because like I say, as adventure riders, I just think it makes the most sense. But actually, because I like using stoves and I just like using something different and trying something else, I've got quite a few stoves. I've got a few more in here that I've not actually got out on the alcohol side. And I just like using them and trying something different. If you go and watch the Paleo Hiker MD on YouTube, it just opens up your world to all these other things that are out there. Okay, so there we have it. That's all of the stoves covered. Well, I hope you found all of that useful. There's a lot to take in there, and it wasn't really a deep dive. We've only scratched the surface on stoves. As I've said, gas is easily the simplest. It's very, very efficient. It gets hot. It boils water quickly. It doesn't particularly smell. It's not particularly messy. You've just got the pain of gas bottles and recharging gas bottles using one of the adapters. You know, that can be a bit of a pain. And if you're away, finding gas might be a bit tricky at times. But generally, gas is the go-to option for most people. And I do use gas, you know, every now and again. But I do like the alcohol. I've sort of bought into the alcohol burner cult. I quite like it, but I use it a lot because other than away from the bike. So if I go mountaineering, I'm up on the hill, I might take an alcohol stove. Or if I'm out walking the dog, making a brew in the wood, then I take the alcohol stove because it's so easy just to resupply your little bottles, and it's a fifth of the price of gas. But then petrol, we're always going to, no petrol, no bike trip. So you're always going to have access to petrol. And worst case scenario, I think you've then always got at least a litre of petrol on the bike in an emergency. So there you have it. I hope this has been useful. I hope you've learned something. By all means, stick in a comment below, ask questions, or if there's something that you'd like to add, tell us about your favourite stove, tell us why you like jet boils. As I mentioned, I'm not a fan of them myself, but like everything, they have a place, and we're all different, and we all like different things, and that's what I like to try and do on my channel, is not preach, but give people the information and share the love, and then between us all, we can look and then decide what it is that we want to use. So, thanks for watching. Please come back to the channel again for another adventure. Please consider giving the video a thumbs up and even subscribing to the channel. So hopefully we'll see you back on the channel soon, or failing that, maybe we'll see you out on the trail riding your bike. Okay, from me, bye for now.